Good afternoon. Working for you?
Yes, good afternoon. Seeing that now we have a responsible government really for the people. When you talk about immigration, is there some way that y'all can lobby to get back? 'Cause to get a visa, you have to go to Barbados. You have to spend this ton of money to go, and then when you go, sometimes you don't even get through. There was a time when you could have sent your passport. Is there a way that we can try and get that back? That would save the people's pocket a lot of money. And the other thing is this. I was listening to the news, and I heard that Trinidad and Tobago have denied 4 of their own residents back entry into the country. 4 people that left to go and join ISIS. So my question is, what are the Caribbean, are the rest of the Caribbean looking out for these people? Are the name on some list in case they try to enter another Caribbean country? And the Dubai issue, listening to you, Mr. Brantley, on the condition that y'all found that embassy there, shouldn't these people that was running that embassy be brought up on some kind of charges? Because in a sense, that's government property. And I believe they should be brought up on some kind of charges. I believe these people got away with too much things. And concerning the tourism thing, I think y'all are doing a wonderful job. Because just Sunday morning before I left out to go to church, I was watching a show here in the U.S. called 4 Weddings. And the prize of the winner was a trip to Nevis. And I'm not from Nevis, I'm a Kittitian, but I'm a Kittitian division. Because when you said St. Kitts, you said Nevis, we are one. And I was so excited. I was like, wow, a trip to Nevis. So y'all keep up the good work, what y'all are doing. You have a God bless day.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry you didn't win that trip, because I'm pretty sure it would be a delightful trip. But that's just an example, because these are things that our team is working on. I wasn't even aware, as minister, that on this particular program there would be a trip. So, when I say that, really the credit has to be shared. Sure. It is a serious statement by me. Caller, you mentioned ISIS and the threat posed. I think you raise a very important question. What would happen if these people show up elsewhere? Regrettably, I'm not qualified to answer the question, because that would be a matter of national security. And certainly the Prime Minister, who's charged with that responsibility, would have the day-to-day handling of that particular ministry. So I regret to say that I can't tell you what has been put in place in relation to that specific question. So you'll forgive me for that. I don't want to trespass on the territory and say the wrong thing. You raise the issue of Dubai and the conditions there, and I understand your point. I will tell you that we are looking very carefully at what options might exist. Beyond that, I would not be in a position to say very much. Only to tell you that we are happy that we have been able to recalibrate, to reset relations there, and to now say to our people at home and abroad that they have proper consular representation in Dubai once more.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ms. Roy. How are you doing today?
Not too bad, thank you.
Wonderful. Minister Brantley, how art thou?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Apparently, it is public information that you were recently in the United States, and one of the many tasks or undergoings was the interview that you conducted on CBS in reference to geothermal energy. I also understand that climate change and green energy is of paramount importance. And being energy independent is also an immediate economy boost. With that said, I think with very limited or just surface research, one can easily realize that geothermal or green energy, in reference to what is being conducted in Nevis, one of the cons is cost. It is it's super expensive. My question to you is basically, how does the Federation or Nevis plan to cover the cost, and if it's covered by outside sourcing? We don't know, because to date, and may I ask you if there's any possibility whatsoever for the citizens of the Federation to have access to the agreement that has been made, or at least to publicize the agreement so that we can know what are the cons and pros for the geothermal. And I must thank you also. The term Nevis, the greatest place, the greenest, place on earth, I really love that. So if you can address those three simple things for me, I'll appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Carla, in terms of costs, the developers are responsible for raising the capital to implement the project. And so there's no upfront cost of that nature to the government. They are responsible for harnessing the resource and for building the infrastructure to get that resource into our grid. You say it is magnificently expensive. I think those are the words you used. It is expensive in terms of the upfront costs, but thereafter the maintenance, running, day-to-day costs are not that costly. In fact, based on current forecasts with geothermal energy, the public in Nevis is likely to see their energy bill drop by as much as 50% based on current costing. And that is bearing in mind that oil prices can say to the public that based on the agreements entered into, the geothermal plant should be completed by December of 2017, which would mean that by January of 2018, when we flick the switch, Nevis does become the greenest place on planet Earth. That is language that is not necessarily new, but certainly language which has become a tagline for Nevis and which we use with great effect. You speak about the interview with CBS. In fact, we did 9 interviews with 9 different interviews. Let me emphasize that. With 9 different television stations across the United States: Wichita, Kansas, I think Fort Myers, Florida, somebody up in Philadelphia, Washington D.C., Virginia, various markets. And in addition to that, we had various interviews with the travel and print media. And what we're trying to convey is a connection between energy independence, green energy, and tourism, in the context of saying that, listen, our tourism plant becomes immediately cheaper to operate, and that the type of clientele that both St. Kitts and Nevis are now seeking to attract are the clientele that wants to come to a place that's clean and green and sustainable, where we are doing something to ensure that our island and our country survives long past us, that we're doing something to save the environment. And so in the context overall, internationally, of climate change, coming out of Paris, the COP21 conference that was held there, where the world for the very first time, but also a framework which recognizes the special vulnerability of small island developing states such as ours. What that now tells us is that St. Kitts and Nevis more specifically, in terms of the tour that I just did, is in the vanguard of that particular development. And so we are making headlines because we're doing something that is truly revolutionary. And indeed, the developers are saying to us that we have not only sufficient power for Nevis, potentially we have power to supply all of St. Kitts and indeed some of the neighboring islands as well. So it means that Nevis can potentially become a net exporter of energy. That is revolutionary, because that means that our economy, for example, which is now heavily skewed and dependent on tourism, suddenly you have a different revenue source for the government. And so that leads to a whole new thinking in terms of what our economy is based on and how our economy is going to look. In terms of costs, as I say, that's a matter for the developers. They will have to raise their costs. I think I'm hearing estimates calling between 50 and 60 million US dollars would be the capital cost required. And they'll raise that, no doubt, through a combination of equity and debt.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, sir.
And good afternoon, Mr. Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Good afternoon, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Okay.
And I'll see you tonight on the local talk. But right now we're on the federal level. Now, you went down to Dubai, and you said that when you got down there, the office, the description of the office, something to do with like how we came past you there. There were no documents and no handing over of the office, nothing. Now that office supposed to be a federal office, and I remember when that office was open, the former Prime Minister, he said that an embassy has been opened in Dubai, and the consulate is none other than Alex Woodley, the mother of his children. Right, that was respected. But I want to know what was the reason, or what is the reason for the documents to be disappeared from that office, and there was no transforming over to this new government. So I would like to know on the federal level what the government is going to do about their office that was so discarded and abandoned. I would like to know what the government is going to do about that, because that one they cannot get away. It seems as though the office was the former Prime Minister one, so he do as he like with it. So that's my question.
Okay, caller, I think that somebody previously raised a similar question, and my answer is the same. We're looking to see what options are available. But speaking to the overarching theme of the question, and that is the sense that the office belonged to someone, I think that we as a nation must come to the realization that when people sit in that seat of power for so long, I believe that they start to believe that the country belongs to them. And I think that that is part of the problem, because there was an unwillingness to accept that the government had changed. And so this particular diplomatic representative of the country perhaps confused her role as to whether she was working for the country or she was working for the father of her children. And I think as a consequence, people can get confused as to what their correct role is. I am not here, nor will I engage in any sort of maligning of any individual. But what I will say is that that is one of the very real dangers of having people in these positions for too long. And that is why Unity has said that we will introduce term limits for the Prime Minister, 2 terms, and then Prime Minister give way and allow somebody else, because we don't want anybody again to get into that seat and start to feel that they're there for good and that the country now becomes their country. I believe the country is our country, and we ought not to confuse service to the people with being a king or being a master or being, whether it's 10 man in one or one of the other terminologies that was employed by the gentleman to describe himself. So I think the reality now for us as a country is to say, listen, we have seen the mistakes of the past. We must now vow not to repeat those mistakes, and to ensure that as a country we become more democratic, we become more open, we become more transparent, and we become, using the word from Leslie, more consultative in our approach to governance. And so all of these, I think, leave a bad taste in our mouth, but they are examples of what has happened, and they give us an opportunity to say never again.